Welcome back to Apex Sci-Fi. Today we look at the evolutionary trade-off between awareness and focus, and why having no blind spots can be a death sentence when facing a human. In the endless struggle for survival across the stars, most species evolved to avoid being eaten. On the world of Oculon Prime, survival was a matter of total atmospheric awareness. The Oculon were a biological marvel. They possessed 14 eyes, spaced perfectly around the circumference of their skulls. They did not have a front and they did not have a back. They existed in a state of permanent, 360-degree panoramic vision. To an Oculon, the concept of a surprise attack was a myth from another world. They saw the bird diving from above, the serpent crawling from below, and the predator stalking from behind all at the same time. Their minds were massive processing centers, designed to handle 14 simultaneous video feeds without a second of lag. Because they saw everything, they felt they were masters of the battlefield. Their military doctrine, the sphere of absolute certainty, was based on the idea that if you can see a threat, you can negate it. They did not use cover. They used wide, open formations where their collective vision overlapped, creating a sensory web that no shadow could penetrate. When the Oculon hegemony landed on the craggy, mist-shrouded world of Argus Prime, they expected the human defenders to be easy prey. They looked at human biology and felt a sense of profound superiority. Humans were forward-facing primates. They had only 2 eyes and both were jammed into the front of their heads. To an Oculon, this was a crippling handicap. It meant that a human was blind to more than 2/3 of the world at any given moment. They called humans tunnel visionaries, a species trapped in a narrow slice of reality. General Valcrox of the Oculon High Command stood in the center of his vanguard as they marched through the whispering canyons of Argus Prime. The fog was thick, a swirling soup of gray vapor, but to the Oculon, it was no obstacle. Their 14 eyes operated across the infrared, ultraviolet, and visible spectrums. They saw the heat of the rocks, the glow of the moss, and the movement of the mist. The humans are hiding because they are afraid, Valcrox signaled to his troops through their shared neural link. They only see what is in front of them. We see the world as it truly is, a complete sphere of information. They cannot move without being seen. They cannot hide without being detected. We will find them and we will delete them. Valcrox was a genius of panoramic observation. But he was a total amateur when it came to the psychology of the predator's trance. He did not realize that the human brain had spent millions of years perfecting a different kind of vision. Not the vision of the watcher but the vision of the killer. 2 miles away, perched on a jagged needle of rock that the Oculon had already scanned and dismissed as empty, Master Sergeant Silas Thorne lay perfectly still. Silas was a human sniper, and he was currently engaged in a biological process that the Oculon could not even fathom. It was called selective attention. Silas wasn't looking at the fog. He wasn't looking at the rocks. He wasn't even looking at the Oculon Legion. He was looking through a variable zoom stabilized thermal optic at a single, specific point. The gap between the 3rd and 4th eyes on the left side of General Valcrox's head. To Silas, the rest of the world had ceased to exist. His brain, a master of filtering out irrelevant data, had shut down every sensory input that didn't help him make the shot. He didn't feel the cold wind biting at his skin. He didn't hear the roar of the distant waterfalls. His heart rate had dropped to a steady rhythmic 40 beats per minute. He was breathing in a specific, shallow pattern that kept his rifle barrel from moving even a micron. This was the tunnel vision the Oculon mocked, but in the hands of a human, it was a superpower. It was the ability to ignore the infinite to master the specific. In the canyon, the Oculon were starting to feel a strange, creeping unease. It was a phenomenon known as sensory overload. Because they saw everything, every movement of the fog, every shifting shadow, and every flickering light was a piece of data that their brains had to process. The fog was alive with movement, and the Oculon were constantly twitching their 14 eyes to track it all. They were seeing so much that they were beginning to see nothing. The humans are here, Valcrox signaled, his 14 eyes darting frantically as the fog thickened. I see movement in the rocks. I see heat signatures in the mist. I see everything. But he didn't see Silas. Silas was a static target. He wasn't moving. He didn't have a heat signature because his ghillie suit was a passive thermal sink. To the Oculon brain, which was hardwired to detect movement and change across a 360-degree field, Silas was just a rock. He was part of the background noise that their panoramic minds filtered out to focus on the moving fog. Silas adjusted his dial by a quarter click. He factored in the wind, the humidity of the fog, and the rotation of the planet. He wasn't guessing. He was calculating with the cold, narrow precision of a machine. The predator's focus. In the human brain, binocular vision, two eyes facing forward, creates something called stereopsis. It is the ability to perceive depth with incredible accuracy. Humans don't just see a flat image. We see a 3D map of the world that allows us to judge distance better than almost any other species in the galaxy. The Oculon had 360-degree vision, but because their eyes were spread around their heads, they lacked the overlapping fields of view necessary for high-level depth perception. They saw the where, but they struggled with the exactly how far. Silas took a final, shallow breath and held it. The world became a single red dot in his reticle. He was no longer a man, he was an extension of the rifle. The Oculon General Val Crox was in the middle of a command signal when his world ended. Crack. The sound of the rail rifle reached the canyon a full 2 seconds after the slug. The tungsten projectile, moving at 5 times the speed of sound, punched through the air with such force that it created a small sonic boom. It ignored the fog. It ignored the wind. It traveled 2 miles in the blink of a human eye. It hit Val Crox exactly where Silas had been looking. The impact didn't just kill the general. The kinetic energy was so massive that it vaporized his primary processing brain, sending a spray of blue ichor across his elite guards. The Oculon panicked. 14 eyes on every soldier snapped toward the direction of the sound, but they saw nothing. They were looking at a mountain of fog and rock. They were looking in every direction at once, trying to find the threat. Another soldier fell. Then another. Every shot was a masterpiece of focus. Silas wasn't spraying fire. He was picking them off with the clinical efficiency of a surgeon. 1 shot, 1 kill. To the Oculon, the deaths were coming from the sky, from the rocks, from the very air itself. Their 360-degree vision was now their greatest enemy. They were so busy looking everywhere for the shooter that they couldn't focus on where the shooter actually was. It's a ghost. An Oculon soldier screamed into the neural net. It is hitting us from the void. I see the rocks, I see the sky, I see my brothers dying, but I see no enemy. They couldn't see Silas because Silas was focused. He was a single point of lethal intent in a world of chaotic information. The Oculon were built to survive in a world of many threats. They had no defense against a species that could become a single threat. By the time the Oculon reinforcements arrived, the canyon was a graveyard. The Oculon had fired thousands of rounds of energy into the fog, hitting nothing but shadows and stone. They had used their panoramic vision to scan every inch of the canyon, but they had failed to see the one thing that mattered. Silas Thorne was already gone. He had packed his rifle and vanished into the mountain before the echoes of his last shot had even died away. He hadn't needed to see behind him. He hadn't needed 14 eyes. He had known exactly where his enemies were, and that was all the vision he needed. The Oculon hegemony retreated from Argus Prime within 48 hours. The psychological trauma of the ghost snipers had shattered their military cohesion. Their soldiers were suffering from a new condition, optic paranoia. They were terrified of the frontal gaze. They realized that their 360-degree vision was a defensive tool, but the human tunnel vision was a weapon of pure offense. The Galactic Council's new advisory on human ocular biology was short and chilling. Advisory: do not be deceived by the limited field of vision of the human species. While they possess only 2 eyes, they utilize a cognitive process known as the predator's focus. This allows them to filter out 99% of environmental data to focus on a single target with absolute lethality. An Oculon sees everything and is overwhelmed. A human sees one thing and destroys it. If a human sniper is looking at you, you are already dead. You just haven't stopped moving yet. Humanity had proven the ultimate evolutionary HFY truth. It's not about how much you see. It's about what you do with what you're looking at. We are the species that looks forward. We are the ones who lock on. And in a galaxy of watchers, we are the ones who hit what we aim at. This has been Apex Sci-Fi. Don't blink. They're watching. If you enjoyed this victory of human focus over alien awareness, hit that like button. Comment below. If you had 360-degree vision, what would be the first thing you'd do with it? Subscribe for the next front of the Apex Factor. The uncanny mimics. The target is down. The canyon is ours.